Hi, everybody, and welcome to On the Hook, the official podcast of Yellow Pike Media. My name is Rick. I will be your host for the next 30 to 45 minutes, and this week we have a great lineup for you. We're celebrating Women's History Month, and we are bringing in all of the amazing ladies who make YPM tick, and a very special guest. Let me start by bringing in the YPM crew. We'll start off with Jordyn Tucker. Hi, Jordyn. How are you?
Hey everyone. Good, how are you?
Very well. I'm very excited for you to be on the show again. It's always fun when you're here. We're going to bring Alex in as well, and then we'll let you guys explain what you do on the influencer team for us.
Hi everyone, this is Alex, back on the hook.
Alex, why don't you start? Introduce yourself, and then Jordyn, you can introduce yourself, and we'll bring the others in.
Yeah, of course. So like I said, this is Alex. This is my voice. I work in influencer marketing with Rick and Jordyn at Yellow Pike Media. Jordyn, what do you do?
I also work in influencer marketing with Yellow Pike with my faves, Rick and Alex. So I'm so happy to be here again.
And we have another guest with us from YPM today, Amanda Solomon. Let's bring Amanda in. One of my favorite people ever, who I get to see in a couple of weeks, Amanda. I'm very excited.
I'm very excited, Rick.
Tell us what you do, because you do a lot.
I do a lot. I think, in a nutshell, I do business development, which is basically just finding friends and bringing them into the YPM friend group here so that we can do really cool, fun digital and in-person activations.
Awesome. And this month, I'm super excited. I have not had the chance to meet her prior to this, but I know exactly who she is. I've listened to her stuff, and I think she's amazing. Our very special guest is Andrea Rene.
What's good, everybody? Thanks so much for having me.
Games, apparently, from what I hear. That's what's good.
It's true. Video games are the best.
Tell us about yourself. Tell us how you ended up where you are.
Oh boy, that's a really long story, but I'll try to keep it very brief for you. So I came from a background in entertainment news, have a degree in broadcast journalism, wanted one day when I was a little girl to grow up and be Mary Hart on Entertainment Tonight, moved to Los Angeles right before the Great Recession hit, and turns out there was also a Hollywood writer's strike then. Not a great time for a young, ambitious entertainment news reporter to join the industry. So I had to make a pivot, and that pivot landed me into video games, and I have been in video games ever since. I went to my very first E3. It was my very first video games job in 2008, and sadly E3 is no more. I'm very depressed about that still. But I have really had a wonderful time working in video games media and doing presenting and live hosting and all kinds of cool stuff over the last decade and a half.
That's amazing. That is an amazing story to just kind of end up somewhere that suddenly the opportunities vanish and just kind of create your own future on the fly.
Well, it was a really tough time, to be frank, when it came to trying to break into video games, particularly as a woman. I know a lot of the focus of this podcast is for Women's History Month, talking about the roles of women in video games in the industry at large. But back then, there were very few on-camera opportunities, and there were even fewer on-camera opportunities specifically for women. And I've been a video game fan my whole life. I started playing from a very young age and never thought that I would have a career in games. I think probably most of the women on this panel didn't envision themselves working professionally in the field of video games when, we were 10 years old. And I am very excited that girls who are 10 years old today probably don't think that way. Maybe they do actually envision themselves working in video games, and that means that we've come a long way.
It's interesting you mentioned the opportunity that you have now didn't feel like it was there when you first started, because right before the podcast, actually Alex and Amanda were talking about a little bit of their background, and it was along those same lines. Alex, why don't you tell everybody what you and Amanda were talking about before we started recording?
Yeah, before this, Amanda and I were talking about how our last time on the hook was also talking about, being a woman in gaming. It had a different title, of course, but Amanda and I have a fun story, and I'm like, should I tell it or should she tell it? Basically,
you should tell it.
Okay. Basically what happened was kind of similar to you. I pivoted to video games I was working in a nonprofit role for, at a few different nonprofits for like 5 years before this. And then when I felt like my time was coming to an end at the last one, I started to look into, like what I could do in video games or in talent management. And that's how I met Amanda. I visited her LinkedIn and then she added me, which I was like, someone like saw me and recognized me. And so then we got to talking and it was really, it was like a year before we ever talked again. And then when she came on the podcast, I was like, I don't know if you remember me, but you had reached out to me like a year ago. And it was really nice to be able to like talk to someone in the industry. And she said, of course I remember you. So that's it.
Of course, I remember you. What an amazing way to like start a conversation with someone who looks up to you. It's so welcoming and inviting. I think regardless of where you are in this industry, there's a lot of that. Was that your experience as well, Andrea? When you first started really kind of getting the people, maybe not the industry, but the people themselves were
You mean a sense
welcoming and
of
inviting.
camaraderie and friendship and recognition?
Yes.
Definitely. It's a small business. I mean, even today, video games feels like a giant global industry because it is, but it also feels intimate in a lot of ways. I think we run into a lot of the same faces in meetings and at conventions, business summits, that kind of thing. Because even though this is a huge business, it still is a really like tight-knit community at the same time. I have friendships that I made in the very early days of my media career in video games that I still have today. And so some of them are my closest friends, in fact. And it's been a big reason why I haven't looked towards pivoting out of video games back into entertainment, which I'm very much still interested in, because I love the people that I work with and I love being able to see them throughout the year at special events and really just maintaining those friendships.
I know there's a saying amongst a group that I've known ever since my first day in the industry. Basically, it's that you have to be nice to everybody because you work for them today, but they'll work for you tomorrow.
I feel
Right?
like that's just good life advice in general.
Well, it's absolutely. But I always thought it was an interesting kind of camaraderie that I didn't experience in other industries. There wasn't that sense of, I will pull you up and you will pull me up as we try to navigate this mess that I found within this industry. Do you have a similar experience to that?
I definitely try my best to always bring people along with me as I move along. I think in entertainment in general, you want to work with the people that you know and you want to help those people succeed if they help you succeed. And it's much easier to bring up people you like and respect and know what their work ethic is than trying to find new relationships. But that doesn't mean that you should give up on those entirely, right? I absolutely think that it's important to have a healthy mix of both to bring people up and champion the people that you know and you respect. But also, I think we as an industry, particularly right now, as our industry desperately needs more diversification, need to make more efforts to reach out to some voices that maybe aren't as prominent.
So let's jump right in right there because this is really the meat of what I want to talk about. How do you feel you started in 2008 in this industry? How do you feel the industry has progressed in the intervening years? And how far do you think we still need to come? And I know there's an awful lot of work. I mean, I can remember personally when people like Jade Raymond were making amazing games and they still weren't getting recognition as a woman creating these amazing worlds and stories. How far have we come and how far do we need to go in your opinion?
I mean, it's a tough question to answer. I feel like we could do a whole show just on that question alone. And it's also varies quite widely depending on who you're talking to. One of the things that always comes up in the women in gaming conversations that I have from other women is that we all are pretty exhausted of this idea that we made an advancement as a woman. Oh, she's a great creator for a woman. Shouldn't we be talking about her as a woman creator? Let's only talk about our achievements because we got them as women. And that's really frustrating for a lot of the peers that I have in this industry. Obviously, I'm not going to speak for every woman who works in the field of video games or at large, but I think we as a community want to be recognized for the contributions that we make just as people that are part of this industry, and don't always feel like we have to have that label as, oh, she's on the panel because she's a woman. It's like, well, maybe she's on the panel because she's a senior narrative designer of a AAA studio and her game sold 20 million copies.
That is an excellent point, especially as I sit here and I look at the four of you and realize there are four individuals at various stages of their careers who are all going to have different experiences because the industry is, in tiny little baby steps, getting a bit better. But I love what you had to say about for a woman. I think it's terrible. I think we do it to everyone, and it's not just women. It's any I am the model. It's any non-white straight guy, right? That it's always there's a caveat to that's good for a fill in the blank. And I know Amanda's had a lot of opportunity in a lot of different places to work with amazing people. Amanda, how do you feel that impacts the industry as a whole, or even just the individual who's being discussed or invited to these things to be invited as a woman instead of, as Andrea says, just a really kick-ass creator and producer or writer?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite frustrating to say, oh, wow, you're so strong for a girl, or you're such a good game designer for a girl, you're such a good VP for a girl. And it's not to toot my own horn, because that's not what this is about. I've finally broken out of that.
No, toot it.
She's
I
so
want you to toot it.
I've finally broken out of that. She's so ABC XYZ for a woman, and people have finally started to recognize the badassery, but that it shouldn't be at a VP level that you're finally respected. And it's also because I'm a bit of a pit bull in that I don't take shit from anyone. So if you're not like me, you're probably still having these comments made about you, which is even more frustrating, which is why, I'm so passionate. Alex knows this, but I'm so passionate about helping other women, because if you don't have that, pit bull in the room, so to speak, women are still not being given opportunities, or if they are, it's because they're a woman, or there's that caveat that there just shouldn't be, because it truthfully doesn't matter at all.
Alex, how important was that to you when you were starting out, that someone like Amanda was willing to engage and help guide you at that early stage of career as you came into the industry?
Oh yeah, that made, a lot of difference to me, to have someone who was already in the industry be able to reach out to me and, not give me any secret sauce or straight path to the industry, but help to guide me in, what I'm interested in, what those positions are called, kind of teach me the language. And without that, I think I would have had a much harder time breaking in. It would have taken me a little bit longer to figure out what job titles I want to look for, even, what companies I want to work for. And so that made a big difference to me.
And Jordyn, I know you're probably the newest in the industry. What was your experience like getting in, fitting in? Because just being a woman in this industry is its own challenge. And I've seen so many friends go through it, and Andrea and Amanda have both, verbalized it so well. What's your experience been like in the last year, 2 years?
I want to say right off the bat, Alex was such a great resource for me when I first started here. She made me feel very empowered and guided me with this new journey of my life. But also with Amanda, I know we recently met with me being here, but when I first got to talk with her, she immediately was offering me help, sent me her number, was like, if you need anything, just let me know. So they have been very important in my process of learning the gaming industry and also learning how to do my job and how to be the most effective person in my job. Not just the fact that we're women, but because we do what we need to do and we do it well. So very appreciative for them.
I can absolutely vouch for that, and you do it well part of that. Absolutely, 100%. Andrea, how does that make you feel, seeing that this kind of network has been flowing and bringing new opportunities and greater support? I'm not even going to say for women in the industry, but within the industry in general, because I mean, Amanda's helped me, Alex has helped me. There's no, in my mind, there's no hierarchy of, well, you can't help me because you're new. Everybody brings something to the table. And I feel like that kind of little column that we just stacked up of these amazing individuals speaks really well to that, about this industry in general. Yeah, it was a stack of women lifting each other up. But I feel, like I said, I mean, Amanda's helped me with things. So I don't feel for me, I don't see that piece that I know you guys deal with every day, because these are resources for me. And ultimately.
Well, and also too, Rick, like you commented, like, we're not just helping each other because we're women. We're not blindly just like, yeah, girl power, go get it. Like, I can speak for everyone here. Like, I help everyone equally, especially people I adore, such as yourself. But there is no, like, secret girl tribe where, like, we won't help anyone else either. I think that's what's also super important, is not to have that, like, blind direction of only one way and not another. Will I give a guy a little bit of a hard time? Maybe. There is no proof of that. I will help my fellow lady out at any time. But I think that's, like, a very clear distinction too, is that, like, everyone here, and I'm sure so many people in the community, are so willing to help everyone and anyone, and not just, one sector.
Listen, the guys of video games really lean into the negging culture, so you got to give it to them when they give it to you. And
Exactly.
It's definitely one of my least favorite parts, but it's like, well, you can't make them stop. What I want to emphasize is that women are wonderful leaders, and I think that's what you're talking about here, Rick, about why you think it's such a fantastic experience working with the women on your team and how they uplift other people, not just the other women on the team. It's because women make great leaders. And there's a lot of research around that, and it's a sentiment that's echoed in a lot of the women in gaming summits that I go to. I love hearing from women who are in the C-suite or in director roles that lead teams and talk about the ways that they like to empower their teams. And I think overall, video games as an industry really could take more notes from the women that are leading and empowering their teams, because I think particularly right now, when teams across the video games industry are having a rough go, because our industry is not doing so hot when it comes to layoffs and reduction of teams and shrinking of the resources that the teams have to keep doing their jobs. It's like you need those people on the inside that remind everybody that, hey, we're still doing really cool projects. We still have awesome stuff that we're working on. We have great people on our team, and this is just a little bump in the road, and we're going to make it out the other side, stronger and better. And women are great at doing that.
I could not agree more. I really couldn't. In every instance where my team lead or my immediate superior was a woman, I feel like those teams actually ran better. And I'm just going to say this to every
come on, right?
male member of this industry. If you want it done right and done well, you probably need a female lead, because I have never had a negative experience with a team being run at an insanely high level of professionalism and efficacy, to be honest with you. It's always been a pleasure for me. One thing I'm curious about, though, is how important, and I think we just kind of heard it, how important do you feel it is, Andrea, that women be seen in those roles by other women contemplating the industry, especially with GDC coming up, next week? How important are those women speaking on important topics within the industries, and groups that kind of make sure that gets put into the forefront? That I feel like next week at GDC is like a really big opportunity to kind of put those points forward and show once again that if you aren't bringing the right people into your organizations, irrespective of gender or anything else, you're going to have challenges. And by reducing personnel to stereotypes and gender types, you're doing your studio and the whole industry a very big disservice.
Yeah, I don't need to do a tight five on the importance of diversification, right? I think like that's a whole other show as well. I think it's incredibly important for women who are in leadership roles across video games to be visible. And it's tough because there's a lot of women who are in those roles that aren't necessarily comfortable being visible or comfortable doing public speaking or talking about the importance of being visible, right? It's sort of a, I don't want to use the phrase like a double-edged sword because it's not quite what I'm trying to convey here. But one of the things that I've said on panels that I've been on in the past is that while I never want to get a spot on a panel because I will be like the token woman on the panel, I absolutely will still take that token slot every time if it means the difference between a woman being on the panel and a woman not being on the panel. Because we're still in an era where the representation is incredibly important and the visibility of the diversity is incredibly important. And so we kind of have to walk this fine line between tokenism and representation. It's a kind of an awkward spot to be in, and the people where it's the most awkward but yet the most important for are the women who are in leadership roles, because it's so empowering for young women who are joining the industry who maybe only hear stories of toxicity and harassment and this like Gamergate thing of yore, which is now just getting regurgitated in the most awful way, and I hope it gets quashed really quickly. It's so important for them to see that a path to leadership is available for them and that they too can run a studio. They too can be, a Sarah Bond, a president, at Microsoft Gaming, right? And I think that if we can get more women who are willing to take the stage in those leadership roles, the industry will be better for it.
Who would you point to as a mentor for you when you first started? Someone who was that representation for you.
Oh my gosh, I didn't have that person. I mean, when I first
started,
there wasn't a woman on camera in a senior leadership role in what I do. She just didn't exist. Thankfully, there are many women in editorial leadership roles, I should clarify, around video games media today, which is fantastic. But we were also pretty siloed when I started. I mean, social media had just kind of come on board. I'm really dating myself here. I've really viscerally remembering starting my Twitter account and being like, what the heck is this platform? I don't even know what this is. I was barely on Facebook. Facebook was just emerging. YouTube was just emerging. And so a lot of those opportunities to connect with other women, particularly in video games media, for me, the field that I was in, were very, very limited. Most of the teams I worked on, honestly, until I started What's Good Games, because I was like, I guess the only way I'm going to get an all-women team is to start my own. All of them were 95% men. Most of the teams I was on, I was the only woman on the team. We were talking 15 to 20 men and just me. I mean, even today, I'll go to press events where I'm one of 2 or 3 women content creators or members of the media, and then there's 30 to 40 male members of the media, and that's still today in 2024. So I wish that I had that person when I was younger, and I'm glad that they exist now.
So if I can ask a follow-up question to that, because I think all 3 of us at YPM have had the experience, not at work, but in other places, of being the only woman in the room sometimes. Do you still, just from kind of a younger perspective in the industry, do you still get nervous when you go into situations like that, or how does it make you feel?
I don't get nervous anymore, and I think that just comes with the fact that I've been doing this for so long, and I have a really comfortable relationship with most of the PR and marketing partners that I've been working with for a very long time. And, I like to think that I have a little bit of confidence when I walk into those rooms to be like, I never ever think oh, you don't know who I am. That's for the birds. But I'm confident in everything I've accomplished, all of the work that I've done, and all of the amazing coverage that I've done over the course of my career. I look back at it really proud of a lot of the stuff that I've done. And I think that gives me the confidence to go into those rooms and stand toe-to-toe with any of those guys, because it turns out I have a lot more experience now than the vast majority of the men that are in the room with me. And that's a great place to be.
Let me back up a little bit, because it feels like a really good good place to put this in. What is it like? Because I don't think you can argue against this. What is it like now to be that face and that mentor that you didn't have for the next generation of women that are coming in? You and obviously Britt. We can't leave Brittany out of this conversation completely. I'm sorry she couldn't be here today, but how does that make you feel?
I mean, it's a lot of pressure, to be honest, because there's not that many senior women who are in on-camera roles specifically who do editorial. I mean, there's even not that many female and women content creators in the video game space. In my research to find What's Good Games competition, I was like, okay, who are the other all-women-run video game news podcasts? And it's like, oh, there's none that exist in the top 100. There's definitely some that are smaller, more fan site or, enthusiast gaming type coverage. But it was really disheartening to see just the lack of representation when it comes to female content creators in video games. When you look at the top creators on YouTube, the top 100 YouTube creators, even the top 500 YouTube creators, the top 500 Twitch streamers, the amount of women that are in those ranks is egregiously small. And I had really hoped by the time I'd gotten to this point of my career that there would be so much more of them. And it's a problem that we kind of don't know how to tackle. We see these stats all the time about how 50% of the gaming audience is women. There's women, actually not even young women. It's women that are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, right? People like me, people like the women on this show that are playing video games, but those aren't the women that are represented in the content creation scene specifically, which is mine, which is why, that's the scene that I'm most familiar with. And you kind of got to wonder, well, is it because women aren't watching these shows? Is it because women don't know that there's other, women content creators out there or members of the media? Like, why is this problem? And the only thing that I can keep going back to is my theory that because for such a long time, women were told you're not welcome here, I think a lot of women, particularly my age, just never identified as a gamer and just never wanted to identify as a gamer. And even now, it's like, there's certainly some spaces online that are still very not welcoming to women. And it's like, well, how do we fix that? Right? Like, how do we let other people, who are fans of video games, who want to follow content creators who are making games or streaming games, talking about video games at large, like, let them know that they are welcome and part of that community. And, we just need to encourage, more people to pursue their passions for content creation or editorial coverage, if that's what it is. And it's a big reason why What's Good Games is who we are. Part of our big mission statement is to make sure that anybody who comes to our show or comes to our community pages, our Discord, our Facebook fan page, our Twitch page, what have you, knows that we don't care what background you're from. If you love video games, you're welcome here.
That's an incredible mission statement. I think that's a great mission statement for literally everybody in this space, because I feel like, whoever you are and what your background may be, the opportunity to connect within the gaming industry, within the gaming space, online, there's a missed opportunity a lot of times that, especially like you said, in certain places where I don't know you, I have no reference for you outside of possibly your voice, right? Which is easy enough to change. So one would think this should be the most permissive, accepting, perfect community imaginable, right? Because we don't bring preconceived prejudices in, allegedly, and yet somehow they filter in. What do you think drives that? Are we just wired that way as humans, or is there just something in this particular space? Because for so long, so many games were very male gaze dominated. They were very, chest pound hero kind of titles, and women were this trophy, right? In a lot of these games, you saved princesses, you as a male were the hero, and everybody else was beneath you, and you had to defend the world. How much of that piece of the industry, which has been here from virtually day one, I mean, they gendered Pac-Man, right? So how how is it that we still have that? We're allegedly better at it. How does all of this fit together in a space that really should be the most non-gendered, non-biased space imaginable?
Well, listen, Rick, there's a lot to unpack there. Okay, I think that you could do a whole dissertation.
It's a half-hour
thesis,
show. Let's
like large research project on the question that you just asked. In fact, a lot of people have. If you haven't ever listened or watched the wonderful slate of people at takethis.org, a fantastic nonprofit in the world of video games, doing a lot of that exact kind of research, I highly recommend you head to their YouTube channel. They've got some great videos on stuff like that. So just to let everyone know, I am not the expert when it comes to that kind of academic research as to why are we just this kind of like shitty to each other. I think you kind of touched on it, where the community of video games really originated from this idea of skill-based competition. Right, like video games started out as this thing that was very much like a binary, like I play you, you play me, we compete, you get a high score, or you play against the computer, you get a high score. And clearly video games have evolved to a much different beast today, 50 plus years later, to become a place for user-generated content where you create digital fashion for avatars in worlds like Roblox, or you can create your own music in Fortnite Festival, right? Like, or you can, build an island and decorate it with all of your favorite pink and white decor and your favorite cozy life sim, right? Like, video games is just such a different place now. But a lot of those legacy attitudes about I must beat you because the whole point of this is for me to have the high score are absolutely residing in the communities. And still there's a lot of, PvP games where being the winner matters and having the top score is absolutely important. That's why we love games, right? A lot of us really love that competition. Clearly, esports is not having any trouble with it. But we have to ask ourselves as a community, like, how do we fit those two things together? Like, how do we still allow this really fun sense of competition thrive and have it be a place where it can thrive in a friendly way, but also make space for all of these other really cool things that now exist in the communities of video games? And that's a question that I don't have an answer to.
If you find one, let me know.
Okay.
I'll keep searching. That. So then let me ask you this. From your point of view, what can we do individually, you, me, Amanda, Alex, Jordyn, to make this a better space for everyone? Not just I don't want to play the for women, right? How do we make this just a really great environment for everyone? And how do we do that in a way that starts to erode that for women, for a person of color, for whatever those disclaimers are that we've somehow just attached to everything? In your opinion, how do we start to erode that away? Hopefully, eventually, to get it out of the industry forever, other than changing human nature.
I think it's just a slow dismantling of the gatekeeping and a focus on accessibility and inclusion. And there's a number of ways that you can go about that. At my company, at What's Good Games, in our community, we take a really strong stance in monitoring our communities and making sure that we keep it safe by kicking people to the curb if they're being dicks. Like, that's one of our rules in all of our community rules that are posted. It's like, don't be a dick. You can be passionate. You can have really strong opinions about a game or a character or the ending or how something worked out. But when you start to direct that anger toward another person, that's when we hold up the big stop sign. It's like, no, you don't get to be mean to other people. You can be mad at ideas and you can be angry at choices. But when you start to turn that anger against other people in your community, that's when you really have to step in and say, okay, we're not allowing this. And until there's a mass adoption of that kind of policy and that kind of policing of community spaces, then there's still going to have that toxicity thriving within these communities. And it's going to take time, right? Like, it takes a lot of education, and educating communities about, hey, that's cool, bro, or yo, bro, that's not cool. When people say certain things, takes a lot of emotional bandwidth, right? It's a really hard process to constantly be telling people how to behave and how to be polite, because you're like, wait a minute, why is this my job? How come you don't understand that that's not a nice thing to say to somebody? And it's tough because you're getting people from all different kinds of backgrounds, and there's so much gray area, and there's so much education that needs to be done. I've discovered over the course of almost 7 years of What's Good Games. But because we make a commitment to doing that work, a lot of our fans echo back to us how much they love being in our community because they feel like they can actually have those passionate conversations about games and not feel like they're going to be personally attacked for their opinions or personally attacked because they play on what we like to call baby ass baby mode, or they only like to play certain kinds of games. This idea that only playing XYZ game makes you a gamer, and if you only play mobile games, you're not a gamer. It's like, no, we don't tolerate that attitude. And I think until you get more people who are thinking about it in terms of inclusion, then we're not going to make as much progress as we need to be making.
I've been a Discord monitor for various different groups at like different points, and I really felt what you were saying when you said, the amount of emotional labor it takes to tell people that's cool or that's not cool is, when you're a mod, you like literally sign up for it. But I really admire your commitment to that, like throughout everything.
I mean, I'm so glad you mentioned mods. We absolutely couldn't do it alone. Our mod team is fantastic, and I think that they, like us, want to have that community maintained. And we know that there's all different kinds of personalities out there. We just don't have the energy to deal with people who are being, jerks. It's like, don't be a jerk. Go online and be happy. And if you're angry inside and you feel the need to take it out on somebody else, you got some issues you should probably work on, not on the computer,
Yeah, I agree.
I'm so glad that mods and community management came up because my start in the industry was as a community manager. And the expectation was, well, you have to have a thick skin. And it still is. And I think you nailed it, Andrea. It's like, no, the expectation shouldn't be that the people in the industry should have thick skins. You should try not being a dick, right? Isn't that really what should be expected? I mean, the onus really is a little bit on the end user, as much as it is, look, people are going to have bad days and they're going to come at you because you're the face, right? So that's understandable to a degree. But you're right. It should be, look, I don't like the decision that was made, not I don't like you and you're an idiot or whatever the barrage of the day is. So I'm really glad we had an opportunity to bring up community managers and mods because they really are the meat shields of most companies, and I don't think they get represented or appreciated enough.
Well, it's really tough now because there's an infiltration of artificial intelligence and AI bot activity in a lot of these mods and comments. And one of the women who works with us, who is just finishing her PhD and is actually doing research on this exact thing, Doc Brooke Elizabeth Phipps on our team, she was really great about letting us know during her research. One of the things she found is that there can be upwards of 30 or 40% of people that you think are stirring the pot in your communities that are actually bots. And I had no idea that it was that high. And so on top of having to try to manage healthy communities with human beings, now we're getting this AI factor in, and I'm just grateful that there's also AI moderation tools that are in development and available now, and hopefully there's going to be more of those to come. I wish they weren't, expensive, but there are tools coming, and it's just an ever-evolving challenge, I guess.
Back to the original question of, how do we grind this away and how do we wear it away and what do people need to do to be better people? Because you straddle a lot of different industries. Your path has been super fascinating, and we could do a whole show on you. But because of that, I'd really like your perspective on this issue, because it's not unique to gaming. It just seems to be really terrible in gaming.
Yeah, gamers are incredibly passionate as people. When I worked back at Clever, Clever TV was a digital entertainment network that started with essentially like an e-online on YouTube. I was hired there to start the gaming channel, Clever Games. They had Clever TV, Clever Movies, Clever Music, and I would get together with the other hosts and producers of the other verticals and lament how I was always struggling to deal with really difficult people in my comments, lots of toxicity and harassment in the comments, and they just weren't seeing the same types of behavior on their verticals. And I just couldn't quite put a pin on why people who are interacting in online spaces and video games were just so much more demonic in some ways than other fan bases. Now, I mean, there's
Perfect
certainly
word.
entertainment fan bases that have their share of toxicity. Star Wars, I'm looking at you. But, I mean, for some reason, video games seems to have the lion's share, unfortunately for us.
I think it goes back to that aggression. We all sort of started in that. I'm going to be better than you and beat you and dominate you and be at the top of the scoreboard. I think that's seeped into so much of it. Speaking of like competition in sports, Amanda, I know you have other jobs that kind of touch on all of those things in a career path that sort of has woven across different verticals, but yet still kind of touched in that gaming and esports space. How do you see this all being, resolved? Maybe not fully, but at least what are the challenges unique to those kind of spaces, and what do you see, and how does that, I hate to say it, as a woman, impact your approach to those spaces? Is it kind of shields up when you go in?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's, at least from my experience, I don't want to speak for anybody else or make any generalized statements. This is just from my own experience. As I've gotten higher, as I've progressed, the other women at this high level, specifically in sports, are actually just as bad as the men. There's a lot of that like mean girl mentality. There is a lot of that like get out of here, I'm the only woman type of thing. And it's quite frustrating because I'm someone that really likes to elevate everyone around me, again, especially women. So to be treated so poorly by other women in the space has been quite disheartening, but also sort of like not empowering, but very like charging that I want to help other good, honorable, professional women rise through the ranks so that there are more of people like me and less of people like them. I'm sure we've all heard it, especially in gaming, a lot of people fail upwards, and that's very similar in the sports space. You see a lot of people that you're like, oh, no way they're going to continue. And somehow they've made it to the next executive level, and you're like, come the F on, guys. Like this, like someone needs to stop this person. And, it's frustrating, but, for me, it's almost like similar to what we were talking about earlier. Like, yeah, you almost have to be the token person. And for some, that's very frustrating. For me, I don't find it as frustrating. I almost feel like privileged. I'm like grateful and privileged to be in that place. Whereas like I was at a Forbes event in Abu Dhabi last week, and one of the women on a panel was talking about being that token person, like woman of color. And she had a very negative sentiment. And this is not a negative thing about her because that's her experience and how she personally feels. But I almost feel the opposite. I'm excited to be that so that I can show everyone how it's done and how it's done with like kindness and compassion and professionalism. So that's my take. Sports ain't that much better, unfortunately. I've experienced it worse. Like it's almost worse. A lot of the women I've met in more executive positions in gaming have either been kinder or just a bit more standoffish, which I prefer over someone being really, really horrible. So
I standoffish over horrible. Yeah, I think I'll take standoffish over that. Jordyn, you've been smiling and you've been nodding your head a lot. So I'm really curious, as kind of the newest member of this industry on this panel, in this discussion, what do you think about what you're hearing? Are you ready to run for the exits now because this is a horrible place, or do you feel better because there are amazing peers out there that are
Please
ready to
don't
help
leave.
you and lift you up? Yes, please.
No, I would say I would say it's very empowering. I think hitting on the fact that some people could be like the token person on a panel, I think also is how you guys are seeing it, very thoughtful and insightful and empowering, because I would rather want to be on a stage to give someone that hope and encouragement that you could do it too, especially as a woman of color and a woman in a industry that doesn't have a lot of women. So to be that face would be a blessing, I think, in my perspective. But also going back to how you said in the video gaming world, how it is a very hard area to get into for women. I would say I play a lot of Call of Duty, so that's one of the most toxic environments I think for women to be in, because I've seen multiple clips on TikTok of people or women performing very well in these games, and in the comments they're like, oh, why don't you just go back to the kitchen? Oh, you're modding it. Oh, this is fake. So like that does not help future women want to be like, oh, I want to post my clips and probably get into content creation as well. So I feel like I'm doing a lot of thinking of how do we make that environment more friendly for women. Sorry, my voice is going out, but I'm learning a lot. And yeah, this is very insightful conversation. I'm really excited to see where the future of women in gaming goes, because I think that we're just hitting the brink of it. And I feel like there's so much more we could do. And so I'm just very excited and inspired with this conversation. Not running away. There's no exit sign here, so I'm good.
That's great. And
We need
also,
you.
who's still using the get back in the kitchen line? What are you, 11?
They are.
Is
Isn't
that
that
the original
crazy?
insult that you can come up with?
They are 11.
Well,
They
sure.
are.
It's like, oh my gosh. I mean, that as an insult was like probably 10 years ago. Yeah, like when I was starting, people were like, make me a sandwich. That was like the big thing. Like, go back and make a sandwich. And I'm like, oh, really? Oh, come on. You can do better.
They love to use it.
I love that this episode is leading into so many different conversations that we could just have other episodes in the future. It's like Jared's work is now done for him for about 3 months. We have great topics. Thank you for that. So we touched on the layoffs earlier. Andrea, you brought it up, and I very quickly looked up the stats. We've seen more than 10,000 layoffs as of January 1st in the games industry, and there have been more. I'm sure that number is probably a lot closer to 15 at this point. What is going on? Because that's just gaming. Is this too much growth? Is this too much of the same, and people are just tired of, Madden 7000? What is, in your opinion, I'm not asking you to speak for anyone else, is kind of fueling this? A lot of it, I think, from my point of view, is acquisitions and redundancies from acquisitions. But it feels more extreme than it ever has in the past. As someone who managed to dodge over 20 layoffs while I was working in gaming studios, I don't understand. It's something that seems to have escalated far beyond anything in my almost 20-year experience in this industry.
First off, congratulations. That's an impressive amount of layoffs to dodge.
I bob and weave
Your
really
back
well.
must be sore from all of that.
Yeah.
But I think that it's a multi-pronged problem or multi-pronged situation, right? It's not just one answer. I mean, a small part of it was redundancies from mergers and acquisitions, but that does not account for the vast majority of the layoffs that are happening. I mean, a lot of the financial experts in the video games industry are pointing to the same problem of an overexpansion period. And now that overexpansion period is coming home to roost. And now it's like, well, now we need to scale back those teams in order to kind of make the books right or get the profit margin percentages back in line. I mean, I think it speaks to a larger issue about corporate America in particular in the United States, but clearly these layoffs are not restricted to North America or the United States in general. But it's this idea of like, what is the marker for what is a success financially for a studio or for a game? And it feels like that goalpost is continually getting moved further and further away and making it more difficult for teams to feel like they actually are successful when they have a hit game. And it's tough. It's a tough thing to reckon with, particularly when you see some of these large studios who have been making huge investments or doing really gigantic projects. A studio like Riot Games, who is spending hundreds of millions of dollars creating new games and an amazing animated series, right? Them taking risks as a studio to say, hey, we don't want to just be the League of Legends people, so we got to take some risks. But with those risks come, some not successes, let's say. I don't want to say failures because I don't think anything that they've put out has flopped. I just don't think it, again, measures this impossible bar of success that the video games industry seems to have right now. And it's just unsustainable, right? I think the perfect example of this is looking at Sony Interactive Entertainment and a studio like Insomniac Games, who just put out a commercially successful, award-winning, critically acclaimed AAA game, Marvel Spider-Man 2, took home a bunch of awards recently at the DICE Awards, and they weren't immune to cuts. They still had to cut people from their team, and they did everything right. You know, so it's like, well, what is going on here exactly? Like, how do you reckon with this idea that there's these widespread cuts, even for teams who are seemingly doing everything they're supposed to do? And it's really just so disheartening, and I don't have an answer, and we definitely want one. So if you're the one making the decision, if you could come forward and give us some details, that'd be great.
Listen up and pay out. Is this a shot for indie companies? Are indie studios maybe possibly the future?
You mean indie, like independent studios?
Yeah, smaller, more nimble. I mean, I've already seen a great number of titles come out in the last year and a half that are... I mean,
it's yes and no. I think that indies are healthier than they ever have been, but there's also just as much risk, if not more, for independent studios who can't afford to take those risks, particularly can't afford the large marketing budgets that a lot of the AAA and even the AA studios can afford. Their thing is fully relying on content creator networks or a visibility and a showcase from one of the platform holders, which is hard to get, right? Getting into like the ID at Xbox showcase or the Nindies showcase, or getting to be front page on the Steam, Next Fest, right? Those opportunities are limited, and there's thousands, tens upon thousands of independent games that are being developed and published every year. And so I wouldn't say that they're the future per se. I think they absolutely have a bright future that's really exciting, but they are under just as much pressure, if not more so, than the big studios are.
Interesting. I see where you're coming from. I just thought, with so many AAA studios being so closed to new ideas, a bit like the film industry is right now, right? If it's not in the MCU, we ain't making it. That indies had a shot to bring those unique titles forward.
Oh, they absolutely do, and they absolutely can find audiences. I mean, look at Pal World, right? That came out of nowhere.
Oh my God,
technically it didn't, right? It's been like in beta for like 2 years or whatever. It's been in development for a while. But the zeitgeist that title had, when I think a lot of us who feel like we've got our finger on the pulse of what's happening in video game releases, like, I didn't anticipate that game doing the numbers that it did. And I think that there's opportunity for those things to happen, but they're just few and far between. And the benefit that a AAA studio has is when they take a really big risk, even on original IP, that risk is still backed by a lot of resources. And a lot of times those teams still have benefits and still get a consistent paycheck, and still have other team members that they can lean on. And indie teams generally aren't as fortunate. But indie teams do have the benefit of being able to take more risks in regards to the the type of content that they're making. It's really, I think we're entering a really interesting period right now, because we've seen a really shocking amount of new studios being opened from legacy developers that come from AAA. A lot of people in senior or leadership roles leaving the roles that they had at publishers and saying, I want to do something different. And a lot of those projects are still percolating. We haven't really gotten to see what they're going to end up being. But I'm really fascinated to see how it's going to work out, because there's been a lot of new studios announced in the last 5 years. And I'm like, they all can't be making the next big AAA narrative action adventure game that's going to sell 25 million copies, are they?
It would be nice if they did. It would be nice to have a lot of new competition in the market against the old guard. Now that we are the world's longest 30-minute podcast at almost an hour, I would like to thank Amanda, who had to leave us for her time and her insights on this episode. And Andrea, thank you so much for being more than generous with your time and your amazing insights and thoughts about this industry. I want to leave with your advice to women who aspire to be in this industry. What do you think the first step should be? Who should they turn to? What should they look for? And what should they do to really come into this industry equipped to handle not just the work, which is unique and challenging at every studio, but also the resistance to them being there, which sadly still exists?
I would say look for women in gaming resources. There's a lot of them out there. WIGI, Women in Gaming International, is a fantastic place to go. IGDA also has fantastic resources as well. As I already mentioned, takethis.org. If you want to connect with people, look for networking opportunities and just start meeting people. But the most important thing that I tell to young women in particular who are coming up in video games is take care of you. If the situation you're in is not good for your mental health or is too much stress, don't put pressure on yourself to stay in a role that doesn't feel like a good fit. Obviously, I want as many women as possible to join the video games industry because I think the industry will be better off for it and will be more robust and will get more fantastic game making out of these teams. But at the end of the day, if those teams aren't a good fit for you, or if you're not doing well in the environment that you're in, take care of you first.
I think that's great advice for everyone. Take care of you first. Jordyn, parting thoughts. What advice would you give someone looking to make their first move?
I would say just do it. I think that's such a cliche thing to say, but I feel like as long as you just make that first step and actually try, then there's no stopping you. You're your biggest critic. You're your biggest enemy. So just get past yourself and keep going.
Alex, how about you?
You two are so smart. I want to echo everything you say. And then also, I think my biggest advice for someone who's looking to get into the industry is, the networking piece. Networking is not fun. It's awkward. It can just feel bad. But don't be afraid to reach out to people on LinkedIn, go on developers' websites that you admire, kind of look at their staff, maybe see if you can reach out to them, and just start trying. Like Jordyn said, just do it.
Kick that imposter syndrome to the curb and ask for more money. Always ask for more money. Because the guy who interviewed before you did. So you got to
That's right.
That is the best advice. Know your worth and demand it. I can't agree more. I'm going to throw my 2 cents in here in all of this, and this applies to everyone. If you have a networking opportunity near you, if you have a GDC, if you have PAX East or PAX West or a South by Southwest or any major show where people in this industry gather, figure out a way to go. Drive in for the day, make that little bit of expense, because you'll find almost all of these shows have one thing in common. They all have some version of how to get into this industry panels, and you should attend them, and you should accost the speakers as they're leaving and ask them 100 million questions before they can get to their cars and drive away.
Well, I wouldn't, as someone who speaks on these panels regularly, that's not good advice, actually. That's bad advice, Rick. Bad advice.
But it happens to me. That's why I say it. And I love doing
resources, but don't waste your money buying an industry pass for the first time you go.
No.
Just go hang out at the lobby bar. Everybody at these shows always hangs out at the lobby bar of the hotels that are near the convention center. Save your money to buy somebody, the right person, a drink, and that will get you probably way further in your networking opportunities than paying money for the badge that gets you inside the con.
As someone who tends to sit in the lobby bar, that's actually really good advice. I'm just so used to getting 5 questions on the panel and then 100 as I'm trying to go to lunch after. It's just,
so you're telling everybody to go do that thing that people do to you?
Yeah, because I love it when they do it. I love the idea that I can pass some of this, whatever it is in my head, onto someone else and it'll be a benefit to them. But the lobby bar is good, especially at a PAX, because that's where everybody's taking meetings anyway, or GDC. That's people are waiting to talk to you there. That's outstanding advice. Andrea, thank you. Alex, Jordyn, I think we need to get back to work now.
Really?
shucks.
Are we sure?
No, not at all. This has been, we could do this for another hour, and I still feel like I could learn a ton from all three of you, to be perfectly honest. But thank you, and thank you to Amanda, who, like I said, had to leave a little bit early today, for giving us more than the usual time, for being so giving of your time and knowledge and experiences, and letting our listeners know what, in my opinion, is really great advice from all of you. I am always happiest when I don't have to do the talking on these shows, and I have great guests that come in and just have wonderful pieces of advice and insights into all facets of this industry. So thank you all very, very much. For everyone listening, thank you for your time. I'm sorry this one went really over. We just hit the 1 hour mark. I know we try to keep these 30, 35 minutes. But thank you for sitting through the whole thing. I hope you learned as much as I did. I am looking forward to being with you again next month on the Hook. Thanks, everyone. Shout out to Jared, our producer, who does a lot more work than I think he gets credit for on this podcast. Thanks, Jared.